So knees out, if they're going outside of your toes, what is that usually going to indicate? Because I think we think about it oftentimes like valgus knee or them caving in and not, wanting to be disruptive there. But what's wrong with them? What are they missing out on if they go too far outside the knee, or they're outside the toe box rather?
It causes hip dysfunction. Your hip is not meant to do that. And that's why the knees out cue, like the spread the floor cue, it works. Okay. I'll tell people it works. It's what I used to teach. But honestly, and I was talking to the two nurses yesterday, I go, you've been taught knees out, right? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, which feels better, hamstring or hip or glute med? They're like, the hamstring all day long. Because if you think about it, your hamstring is this enormous muscle next to this teeny tiny glute med. The glute med is meant to create that explosiveness at the last part of the squat on the way up or on the jump position, but it's not meant to stabilize the hip when you're squatting down, especially heavy loads. And then by the time you need to use the glute med to stand up and be explosive, it's got nothing left. So can you use it? Yes, you can use it. Is it going to be good for longevity? No. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that I screwed up my hip that way. Like there was a time for like a whole summer where I had to use the mobility wad voodoo floss to keep my hip together because I kept using my glute med for everything, and my groin was screaming at me. I was all groin and glute med. And then as soon as I started learning how to squat with my hamstrings, I was like, oh, okay.
We spend a lot of time, or people spend a lot of time trying to strengthen the glute med. I think about that like with those bands.
Yes,
I had one of those hip halos, and I was like, oh, I just need to do the hip halo before I squat every single time, and I'll be fine. And I had this routine going, but it never really fixed my knee.
But here's the problem with that.
Stronger, but
you just have to look at the context of the hip circle, the halo. Who developed the halo? Powerlifters. Powerlifters, where do they squat? They squat about parallel or above. CrossFitters, weightlifters, you squat below parallel. If you really want to get nerdy right now, like the whole torque chain is for powerlifters, their external torque, which is what the hip circle strengthens. So it's completely appropriate for those guys because they're wide stance, they're here, and they go boom, and they finish, and that's all glute med. So the hip circle, the halo makes sense for them. But for a CrossFitter who wants to go below parallel and come back up, to overuse that glute med is just creating hip dysfunction. If someone uses glute med for the entire squat, then they're trying to stabilize the hip going down with the glute med, and then when they get to the part where the glute med is supposed to work, it doesn't have anything left. And that's where you see the knees cave in. You see the knees crashing in because there's no glute med left, which, it's not overly stupid to do the halo thing because it does serve a purpose. But if you're only using that little teeny tiny muscle to do the whole thing, that's when it gets bad. Like, hey guys, I just want you to feel this real fast. Pull your heel to your butt. Bring your knee up and bring your heel to your butt. The part that you feel here, your hip flexor, that's in the level 1 guide. We say to use your hip flexors to pull yourself into the squat. Now, pull your heel to your butt. You feel your hamstring turn on? Now look at your toe and your knee. Are they pointing the same direction? Yes, they are. Did you do anything weird? No. Okay, cool. So now when you squat, just pretend like you're pulling the ground up to you and create that same feeling. You'll never have to tell someone knees out again. In fact, I never say knees out anymore. That's how I coach it. Because I'm getting the thing I want. It's a point of performance, right? We want the knee out, and for someone who's like just not, who doesn't get it, I will say knee out because it's a good, better, best situation, right?
But you don't necessarily want the knee out. You just want it in line with the toe.
I want it in line. I want it in line. I used to be the guy because I saw Kelly Starrett do this. Kelly Starrett used to say feet straight, knees out, and squat like that. And my knees would be way outside my toes. And when I would demo for the level 1 seminar, they're like, hey, bring your knee in. At the same time, I had a lot of hip dysfunction because I would squat like that. And then my glute meds were overworking and I wasn't using anything else.
But it's okay for the knees to go over the toes.
It is.
You were doing it at what they probably sell as gross level.
Yeah.